All right, and we're live now. So, g'day everybody. Good night to all those people in Australia, and good morning to everybody who is joining us from around the world. I've got a good friend, young Jim Smith, coming all the way from America. So, Jim, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about? Oh, and I've got a little bit of feedback. Young Jim Smith. Coming all the way from America. So, Jim, would you like to introduce yourself? Oh, sorry, Jim. Tell us a little bit about a massive amount of feedback coming out through me. Just got to listen to myself twice, do that little bit of an introduction. Okay. The beauty of technology, but I've just shut that down. So, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you're here tonight on Aussie Ed?
Sure. So my name is Jim Smith. I've been in education for 30 years. Social studies teacher, geography teacher, history teacher, lots of years in the classroom. Got involved with assessment when I figured out I was giving reading tests in my classroom rather than social studies tests. That there was a big issue there with kids that were functionally illiterate in my room, and everything I tested on them, basically, you had to be a good reader. And that kind of set me down the road, that and hearing Rick Stiggins talk once earlier in my career. And I began to see the power in classroom assessment. To make a long story short, I designed some systems to look at data, to look at big picture assessment data, and especially classroom assessment data. And that's where my passion lies, in the classroom. I worked in elementaries, I worked in middle schools, and now I'm trying to make it as an independent consultant through Solution Tree and through a local company here in Minnesota. We work with a bunch of different schools, mostly in assessment design. And that is where my passion is in life.
So when you talk about some of those systems that you looked at, what for you was the real turning point? What did you do that made you feel that you were creating something that was new and it was making, I suppose, a teacher's life better, but enabling teachers to have more impact with students? Oh, and I've got a little bit of feedback. Jim Smith, coming all the way from America. So, Jim, would you like to introduce yourself? Can you hear that feedback? There's a massive amount of feedback coming out from me. Just got to listen to myself twice, do that little bit of an introduction. I have no idea what that is. The beauty of technology, but I've just shut that down. So, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you're here tonight on Aussie Ed?
Sure. My name is Jim Smith.
That's me.
I've been in education for 30 years. Social studies teacher, geography teacher, history teacher. Lots of years in the classroom.
I don't know what's happening. Got a huge amount of double feedback here.
Social studies tests.
Really sorry to everybody who is watching. I cannot figure out.
And everything I tested on them, basically, you had to be a good reader. And that kind of set me down the road.
You know what?
Rick Stiggins talk once earlier in my career, and I began to see the power in classroom assessment. To make a long story short, I designed some systems to look at data, to look at...
I really apologize here, Jim, and I apologize to everyone who happens to be on. I really don't know. I'm trying to troubleshoot as fast as I can.
Middle schools, and now I'm trying to make it as an independent consultant through Solution Tree and through a local company here in Minnesota. We work with a bunch of different schools, mostly in assessment.
Jim, do you have an extra tab on? So when you talk about some of those systems that you looked at, do you have the YouTube channel as well? Real turning point. What did you do that made you feel that you were creating?
I'm sorry, Brett, I couldn't hear what you said.
No, I'm just. Do you have another YouTube tab open? Do you have two playing by any chance?
YouTube? I might.
Yeah. It might be this the talk from that coming out a little bit delayed, a few seconds after we've spoken.
I think that's it. It just disappeared when I shut it off.
Oh, there you go. There you go. All right. Well, that's all right. Well, problem solved.
So that was my problem. I apologize for that, Brett.
That's okay. I was trying to look at every feature we had here. So I suppose if I jump back just a step and I ask you, what was it that you created when you were looking at those different solutions that you felt actually did make more impact on students?
I would like to say it's some miracle thing that I came up with that changed it, but the pieces I came up with were simply trying to look at the data and inform the teachers of the data from their classroom assessments. The real magic in the whole process was the conversations that happened around that data. By bringing people together in a collaborative format to talk about their instruction, to talk about learning, to talk about what works in their class. And to me, that was the turning point. When I would see a team of 4 teachers in the classroom talking about a science assessment, one rookie who just had limited experience and 3 veterans, and how they mentored that rookie along into becoming just a wonderful teacher, and the impact of that on the instruction of the kids. That was the first moment. The second moment, when I had some 3rd grade kids tell me about their learning and where they're at in their learning and what they had to do next in their learning. And this was probably the most powerful piece that I saw. I get the chills thinking about it just now. These were 3rd grade kids who understood how to use formative assessment to change what they perceived was perhaps the right way to go with things, and to move on and to learn new things and to become independent learners. And those are the 2 big pieces over the years. It's about them. I've always been a facilitator. I've always been a student of what's going on. And it's about those conversations.
And that's very funny. I was having a talk just about half an hour ago during our chat. I've actually got a special visitor in my house at the moment, one of the Aussie Ed team, Rob McTaggart, and we were just talking about who needs to be doing the most work during the learning cycle. And it's not necessarily the teacher that has to do the most work, it's the student. And I sent one of, I think, Gillian Williams' quotes, and it was about the recipient needs to be doing more work in the feedback process rather than the donor of that feedback. And if you're working, then you're learning. So who do you want to be doing the learning? You want the student to be doing the learning. So they're the ones that need to do the hard yards.
And especially for those kids that struggle, we want them to see the success that they've had because of their hard work and because of what they do. And Dylan William talks about that motivation. I think I had this in the chat, actually. Motivation is a consequence of achievement, not a cause of achievement. He's really big on it. And that's one of my favorite quotes in education.
Do you want to say, I'll tell you what, I'll get you to reinforce that. And as I'm just scrolling through some of the questions in the live chat now, so anyone who is watching along live, if you just type in a question, I'll put it forward to Jim, and we might be able to go there. We've got Jack Wolf, who's already said conversations are so powerful. We have learning walks at his schools, learning walks. So some awesome and powerful working with teachers who have experience. So I suppose learning from peer to peer about different techniques and how that can be useful.
One of the problems we have in this country is we've had so much of testing of accountability, the big picture tests, where you have a staff meeting and we talk about goals for the next year, and those goals often center around increasing our test scores, where, in my opinion, if our conversations in our staff meetings, the walk-arounds, focused on the use of formative assessment, how it's being used, what conversations sound like when it's being used, we could let go of that conversation about the test scores, because our test scores are going to go up if we start getting those kind of practices in place. So we do need to shift that discussion, I think.
Yes, totally agree. I've got our first question from the crowd. So one from Cassandra here, Mene, I'm not sure, apologies for the pronunciation there, Cassandra. The question for you, Jim, is how do you shift resistant teachers? What data tool would you recommend for us to show teachers the effectiveness of formative assessment? That's
always the struggle. Hattie talks about it being the most powerful thing you can do in the classroom. We can come up with all the evidence we want that it works really well, but that doesn't turn the learning or the knowing into the actual doing of the process. I do believe it is a long and slow process. It has a lot to do with the culture of the school and building the collective commitments of the teacher over it. And it takes conversations. When I first started doing this work, my first year was spent doing anything I could for teachers. I mean, literally, if they had a sick kid, I'd walk them down to the office, just trying to be helpful, and then trying to talk about the conversations we could have about assessment. Once those conversations got started, there was no holding the teachers back. They used to not really like to see me come in with some data. And by the end of 2 years, if I didn't get the data to them within a few hours of them getting the raw materials to me, my phone was ringing. They wanted the data in the room. So it was a fairly long process. The people that didn't want me there at first were calling the school board when my position got cut because of budget cuts a few years later.
Oh, wow.
So it's just when we have conversations about learning and the teachers actually see the impact it can have on their class, it makes a big difference. But it's a long, slow, collaborative process to get there.
I think you just reminded me in there of a quote. I think it's from Dufour and Dufour with the talk of mutual responsibility. So as a leadership team and with leaders within the school or even leaders within a school system, whilst as educators have the responsibility to do the best thing that they can do for their own professional development and for the impact of their students, but there is a mutual equal responsibility from a leadership perspective to make sure that you're supporting those teachers and actually giving them the appropriate, not only professional development, but the appropriate resources for them to do their job. If you're going to ask someone to do something differently, you're going to ask someone to do something effectively, then you need to be doing it too. And that's exactly what you were just doing there. The teachers who had become reliant upon maybe reliant might be the wrong word, but they were so used to the data, they wanted to know when it wasn't there fast enough. So it's a good sign that things are working.
Yeah. Ken Williams, I've heard him talk about it, and his job as principal was to attack and defend and to hunt and gather. He would attack and defend his programs in the school, and he would hunt and gather for all the resources and the right people to make things work in his school. And he kind of defined his job in leadership that way.
There you go. Just having a little look here, we've got Gillian Carter. Now, Gillian Carter said had a great message before. Quite a few people agreed with it. Heavy lifting needs to be done by the students, and I think I agree with that, and a number of other people in the chat just did there. But I have a question from her. She's looking for learning protocol. What are we learning? Why are we learning this? And how do we describe our learning? Do the students get that learning is fun? So I'm literally reading this live. So as we go there, so looking for a learning protocol. What are we learning? Why are we learning this? Describe your learning. So this might be for the students.
Mm-hmm. Well, when we talk about school reform from a leadership point of view, and not reform, but just building common commitments over how we're doing learning, we always look at the why. Why are we doing that? And unless that why is in place between the administration and the teachers, things don't go very far. That works for the kids as well. They need to clearly understand what they're supposed to learn, why they're going to learn it, what authentic ways do we have of teaching these things to the kids and the content that we require them to have, and how do we engage them in that process? That has to be thought about up front. Some of the newest work coming out, I work with Nicole Vogley in a work called Design in 5. She does a lot with assessment design, and one of her opening criteria is, how are you going to engage the kids? How are you going to start building that investment in learning that we want to see? That should be upfront in your assessment design and your planning design and instruction. It's a huge shift, at least in this country, with getting away from the point system that we've developed over the years and to talk about learning. Again, it's one of those things that takes a long time and a lot to build. And I think I'm rambling here, and I'm not necessarily.
No. I think that's I think what you've struck on a universal issue there. I think from a political perspective, so often here within the media or politicians talking about stagnating growth or academic performance when we compare Australia to PISA ratings and PISA standings and things like that. And we can easily fall into the trap of trying to teach for results and look for what the test is, but we forget that learning itself, education system, is far more than just preparing students just to perform in an academic test environment.
I agree 100%. I mean, I do think it's about results and accountability, but the results and accountability to me come at that formative level where we do need to hold the kids accountable for responding to the feedback that we give them on the formative assessment pieces. And I know accountability can sound a little nasty sometimes, but it's changing that conversation to being about learning and the excitement of learning. When I go in a chat like today and I see the excitement these educators have when their kids learn, it's infectious, and we have to keep moving that to bring the kids into that conversation as well.
Cassandra's just typed back here that reinforcing what you've just said there, that the trap is to engage students within the assessment process.
Yep. Yeah, I agree 100%. It's got to be meaningful to their lives. And we also have to quit thinking about our content so heavily like we do. Content does matter. Learning how to learn matters more. A lot of people say if you can Google it, it shouldn't be on an assessment question. Assessment should be about the learning process, about the scaffolding pieces along the way to learning. It shouldn't be necessarily, especially in social studies, which is my personal area, it shouldn't be so much Google information as how to do things, how to understand things, how to work in a collaborative group, how to process information off the internet. It's got to be about the 21st century stuff, and it's got to be about learning. When you and I got into education, or at least I'll speak for me, there was no such thing as a data and assessment coordinator. That job did not exist. It's something I had to grow into in my career as an educator. And those are the kind of skills that kids need. They need to learn the flexibility to learn in different ways and to try new things. And we need really to have schools that encourage that. And there's a lot of fun in that as well.
Yeah. Look, I just looking back at my own career, I remember when we first began using a lot of data to try and inform our process and what we were doing. You could easily be caught in overkill with collecting too much data and then getting so much data and trying to look at that data. You spent probably an inordinate amount of time collecting data, but then not actually being able to utilize that data effectively for the purpose of why you would have wanted it in the first place. I think we've got a better balance now here as we've sort of experimented with procedures and whatnot. I wonder, my question is, if you were going to give some advice to an early years teacher, someone who's just coming into the profession, what would you say to them about managing data and how to actually do that effectively to maximize the impact with their students? That little way, if you could just sum that up in 30 seconds or less. No.
Okay. There is so much data. So much of it probably shouldn't impact a first-year teacher. They're trying to juggle and balance everything. A starting point for me would be the formative use of assessment piece of data. I had one visual in the chat where the formative assessment piece is a big box at the bottom, and we're maybe letting go a little bit at the standardized stuff at the top, at the state tests of accountability at the top. I would start trying to bring some embedded discussion of formative assessment into their conversations with their peers as they're preparing their lessons, to just start thinking about it. I've found that if I walk into a room and start demanding them to do formative assessments and all that, they're already overwhelmed. They don't need to be overwhelmed anymore, but at least start the conversation about how does it look like that you know what the kids are learning in the classroom. What evidence do you have of that? What easy ways can you find, starting small, to start building that kind of knowledge? And over a year or two, it can happen, especially if you've got some good mentoring colleagues in the building. And I've been really fortunate to work in some of those situations and see the power that a mentor can be in that situation. It was more than 30 seconds, sorry.
No. You did very well. You did very well. I've got a few questions here that are starting to rack up. We'll only go for a few more minutes, but I've got one here from young Christopher. Would you mind giving specific examples of formative assessments which should feature in our class on a regular basis? Which is a little bit of what you just said with one of the ones that you shared within the chat.
Mm-hmm. We can look at formative assessment as a couple of ways. I look at informal ones where they're like an exit slip in a room, something very quick that gives you a little bit of information about something. There's also, you can look at formative assessment as a hinge assessment, I think is what Dylan William calls them, where we're making a short assessment, maybe about 4 minutes to give to the kids on one specific learning target. And William says you shouldn't take more than 2 minutes to score it, and then you can give feedback to the class based on those on the thing that they just did. Boy, there's a YouTube video of in a math class where it was just really done well, where the kids did one problem on a little card, then handed the cards up to the teachers. She looked for the common mistakes. They went over all the common mistakes in class. It wasn't individual feedback to the kids, but she just nailed it, and it took a few minutes. A formative assessment, it can't take the whole class period. It's got to be a quick thing that's easy to score and easy to move on. And we can, there's a couple of books on that we can talk about too.
Yeah. Slightly more than 30 seconds for that one. I was just thinking of some of the answers that came up during the chat. I've seen used quite well, those plickers. I don't know if you've ever seen plickers used, where the children have a few different cards, and the students can, the teacher can ask a question. Students can hold up a card, and you can just put your iPad across and go ding, 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 ding. The iPad sort of can pick up all these different oddly shaped answer cards and gives you instant feedback, so you know who's understanding things, who needs more support, and you can adjust accordingly.
Yeah, actually, my wife is a math teacher, and she's used plickers. So
yeah. I'm a big fan of the old Kahoot, though. I don't mind a little bit of a Kahoot at the ending of a lesson.
Well, it's interesting too that I've been in a couple of technology talks, and I've been out of the classroom for 8 or 9, 10 years now, and it changes so quickly. I'm losing kind of contact with it. I've got to get my gaming gear on it.
Yeah. Well, I think the real good thing there, or the comment there, is that yes, technology has changed, and yes, we talk about 21st century skills and 21st century pedagogy, but good teaching is still good teaching.
Yeah.
The difference might have come in perhaps the way we might deliver some content, or a contemporary way in which we interact with our students. But quality pedagogy still trumps anything that we might do with the actual tech tool itself.
Yeah, I know Jim Collins in Good to Great talks about technology as being an accelerator of learning and knowledge, and I always agree with that. But I'm beginning to change that a little bit. I mean, just this example of what we did today on the chat, I learned so much from somebody that when I point at the direction you're in, I have to point down through the earth because you're on the other side of the earth here. And it still blows me away that we can be doing what we're doing right now. It's amazing.
That's it. Everything new and nothing's different. Like, yes, we're talking on the other side of the world live. Very, very new, but you know what? It's 2 people sitting down having a conversation with a few people eavesdropping at the same time.
I love it. Yep.
Look, Jim, I think we might pull up stumps, and there's a nice little Australian reference for you there. So we might end our chat soon. Is there anything you want to say as a parting look, drop of wisdom or pearl to share with us?
Just talk to each other. The power in all of this is the power of collaboration. The research is super clear on that we need to be done with being in silos in our rooms. We solve problems now by collaborating, by you and I collaborating halfway around the world. My colleagues now are all over the world. That if I have a problem, I know who to go to in Los Angeles and Seattle and Canada. People that I think very much of and will drop everything they're doing to get online and help me with my issues. And we just need to keep those conversations going in that direction.
That's it. That's brilliant. So, look, thanks a lot. My apologies for a little bit of a hiccup at the beginning there with a little bit of tech issues, but I really am very grateful for you joining us, not just now with the chat, but then also, or not now with our YouTube live, but then also in the chat. This has been something you and I have been discussing now, I think, since before Christmas, just waiting for our time zones to realign, and it's been fantastic that it has. And on behalf of Aussie Ed, I'm very grateful for you to join us, and really appreciate it.
Well, I've really enjoyed it, and I do enjoy going to your chat. You in particular aren't afraid to take some risks with technology, and I really appreciate that in what you do. I wasn't going to do video recordings of me asking the questions like you did last week, though. I thought that was kind of over.
that was the first time. Oh, that was tough too.
Well, thank you very much.
No worries. Look, I might end the chat now. You stay online. We'll talk in a little moment as well. But thank you, everybody who stayed along for a listen. And hopefully we all are somewhat wiser for the chat. So thanks very much, Jim. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.